What's up there? Hello out there, YouTube and all of that. Yeah. So I'm trying to just hop into it. So what I'm doing here is a video talking about and analyzing themes in the new Netflix movie, Bright. I feel like I don't feel like people are talking about this movie enough. I don't think they understand the implications of everything that it's talking about. It is a movie with Will Smith. I mean, honestly, I do want to take a moment to recognize that this movie is starring Will Smith. I'm pretty sure they paid him a lot of money to make their movie. Will Smith is not a low budget, a low ticket actor. He's getting paid. The usual stuff that other movies that he would do would always get big acclaim. So trying to make sure that we talk about that. But I mean, I feel like the amount of money that Netflix put into it, they want people to understand. And for even Will Smith to do a movie with Netflix, I feel like that's a big deal. It's a big deal to a certain extent. The movie is meant to do a whole lot, and I feel like it does that. The movie is meant to do a whole lot, and it does that. Well, I feel like it's a good movie. It's a good movie. This review or analysis is not bashing the movie. I think it's a great movie. It's aesthetically sound. It is aesthetically sound, definitely. And some people just say, yeah, the movie was okay, but it's like, nah, it for what it was aiming to do, it did it really well, and it wasn't as much action as some people might expect. It was a lot of action, though. I mean, it was intense. It was a roller coaster thrill ride, or whatever. But the movie in itself is a bit of a cultural analysis. It is a bit of a cultural. It makes statements about modern times. Some things it makes statements about culture and race in modern times. Like, just think about how much the movie has going on in it. I'm trying to script this discussion though. So for all the viewers watching, in terms, so what we're essentially going to be talking about is why things I want you to consider as I discuss this movie. Questions to consider would be, why is this story fake or not? And then I'll get into why is the story fake or not? And another question is, who are the orcs really? Because the orcs, where to start? Well, I'll start with talking about the orcs. The orcs. This may have spoilers. The orcs are very interesting. The orcs are very interesting part of the cultural discussion, because the orcs, we do have the elves and everything like that. We have the elves and their counterparts and the fairies. This story, for those who don't know, this story is a racial story about cultural differences, but having to do in what is it? The idea of, is it fake or not? Is set to a certain extent. It doesn't say if it's in the future. There is not much in the story to show that there is. There's not much in the story to show that they are in some displaced future outside of present day 2018. It doesn't. There's not much. Do they talk about the different cultural things of fairies and these different species of beings of life? But beings of life. with but it doesn't exactly, there aren't any futuristic things. I mean, Will Smith has done iRobot, did Men in Black, all kind of futuristic technology that was out of this world, vastly out of this world. So some kind of temporal advancement from us, but it doesn't say that this is, even they make a mention of that the orcs have this long history of doing this, that, and the third, and the war from so far, so long ago, a history of 2,000 years. Specifically, is what they say, a history of 2,000 years that these people have been feeling this way. But it doesn't say that this was year 4,018 or anything like that. The temporal placement. So I mean, I feel like that's done on purpose because, well, people are always saying how they wish that all these things, werewolves existed, magic. People always say nowadays that we wish magic existed. The older you get, you wish that magic existed. But but with the massive influx of nerd culture that's going on nowadays, which was influenced by, I mean, the influx of internet. It's very modern. It's timely. It is a very timely story. It's a very timely tale. But it is a very timely depiction of culture as it is right now. The history aspects of it. That I mean, people would like to believe that fairies still exist, so why not let fairies still exist? But if fairies still existed, how would you react to them? To a certain extent, it's like we can't even get black and white solved and resolved, but y'all want to talk about, y'all want fairies to exist and werewolves and magic that will go along with. What about the magic that's here now that we already abuse? The magic, and we will talk about what the magic is, because there's the magic is a certain thing. But if magic, if this, the question is really, is this world isn't that far removed from ourselves. So as you watch the story, the movie, is supposed to question how much alike is this to the to reality. How much alike we're different. You would think it's so different because it's orcs with green skin and things like that, but it's not. It's definitely not. All art is meant to question, make you ask how close this is to reality. It's a fantasy world. Even Alice in Wonderland, how close to that is to reality. Uh, Back and forth or not. Uh, and all art has communication ideas and things that they're trying to get, that the artist is trying to teach to you throughout this conversation of you defining was if this story, this fantasy world is real or not. And so adventure begins. But this adventure begins, and the idea of adventure is very apparent throughout the story. The entire movie is a bit of an adventure about, is to a certain extent a nerd adventure. It's very modern because it takes into account the massive, highly nerd culture. Before it was you didn't want to be a nerd. Nowadays you want to be more nerdy, so you want more differences uh, amongst these people. Um, but it's a very modern tale because all peoples are trying to come out. All peoples are trying to express themselves in different ways, and it would seem is very fitting that we would have a story about nerd. I mean, about the racial story focused on around the ideas of these fantastical creatures of species. It seems very necessary. It's called for at this point. Um, I will say the story to a certain extent feels like Crash. It feels like it was supposed to have the same effect of Crash, but it had to get a little market money marketized, commercialized, uh, to make it into a sellable idea that everybody, and then throw Will Smith in there, yeah. But I do feel that the movie is meant to speak on race. It's meant to be a very heavy conversation on race. I mean, but race relations and also race relations in America, American ideals of equality. Let's talk more about Will Smith. Will Smith, previous movies that he was in with MIBs, some people that was holding it together, but MIBs maybe. Aliens and all. But more importantly, MIBs was great. But MIBs and the success of Men in Black was precedented by Will Smith's also feature role in Independence Day, um, and the Americanism of that. American-esque of that. The movie in itself feels very American from the jump. Ward is a police officer, which is a very interesting role for this character. One of the first things that I mean, his daughter hates the fact that he's a police officer. She knows that police officers get all kinds of hell thrown at them just for being a police officer. Even she knows that everybody hates cops, but and so to a certain extent, you want to have some sensitivity to the fact that everybody hates cops. But the opening scene also, a cop is saying it was elf lives don't matter today. We was killing the elf that was flying around the thing. I think it was an elf or a fairy. I mean, elves and fairies, are they alike? Or are they different? Hmm, what lore would you need to check for that? But the lore is unimportant. It truly is unimportant because they don't tell you much of the history of, but the story is happening right now. The lore, check a different book, they're going to say a different thing. But the thing is like how the major question about these species is how alike are these species to real people, us right now. All of these different species are it's somewhat meant to be reflective of who and how we are now. The opening scene, I will start with talking about the opening. I'm not going to expand on much of the ending parts of the story. I'm going to try to steer away from that. But in that first scene, Ward says elf lives don't matter today, which draws connections to the Black Lives Matter movement, and is a cop saying a reference to the Black Lives Matter movement and saying elf lives don't matter today, as if a cop were to say Black lives don't matter today. The weight, the pain of such a statement. But this is our protagonist, main character, who we're supposed to be on his side of the story regardless, unless things change aesthetically. But we're supposed to be on his side. He's essentially our hero, so we have to align ourselves with his perspectives. But everybody hates the policeman, and the police force even engages in high school like antics as they ridicule Jacoby in the hallways and stuff. But these ideas of race. So there's the cop and all of his duty. I will say it's essentially it sets up a precedent that he's a cop, he's a police officer, and police officers are meant to be heroic. Police officers are meant to be the heroes and the saviors of justice. What is justice? Talk more about that later. But police officers are meant to be heroic, so it would only come as it's no surprise that these two police officers became the hero of the woman and the race. The human race, not just the human race, but all races. They held these races together, these species, races and species, because race is a whole other thing that only the humans deal with, not even the elves. And Other races don't even, the other species don't even deal with race as the way that humans deal with race. Ward is an interesting character because I was also from the beginning. He's Ward is a black man, and in a cultural story, you would expect the black experience to be about everything that the black experience has been about, specifically civil rights, racial equality, things like that, racial oppression, the things that we know. We've heard these stories before. They know we've heard these stories. We know that we've heard these stories before. But also to go with that, it's not about just the black people's racial experience. He opened the movie. It features him in an interracial marriage. Um, which is symbolic of he is a human that is ascended above the racial quandary. At least within himself and his love life, his wife, his family, they have ascended past race. Um, this idea of ascension will become a very um, the idea of ascension will become a very um, integral idea for the explanation of the movie Bright in itself. But that's just the Ward's character. They have overcame, and he sees past race himself, which is a true thing. But the implications of race are very apparent within the movie. Even in the opening scenes, we have things that say elves only, which directly connects to ideas of whites only. The black race connections are throughout the movie, but it's deeper than just talking about blacks and whites, because how it gets complicated and how the different races are prescribed different assumptions of character traits. The elves, you see them as fancy, rich people, rich, and then everything that comes along with being rich. Fancy, you see them in the movie depicted fancy, how with all they fancy clothes, pinky rings. but but and the more importantly though, the orcs themselves. It makes me question who are the orcs were meant to be. So elves only makes you think that the elves are meant to be closest to white, a depiction of white people. But the question of who are the orcs is a more interesting question, because they openly look the furthest away from human beings. Um, and you can't hide their difference from everyone else is the main thing about the orcs. I would initially say in that aspect that they are somewhat close, more similar to black people, because black peoples, colored peoples, uh, throughout history were thought of as the other. You see their dark skin, and the darkness of their skin means that they are different, less than, um, racial oppressively speaking. And things like that. But it's meant to say that you're someone who their color of their skin openly says that they are different from the mainstream, the status quo. The orcs they wear they wear that badge. The orcs have to wear their difference openly, um, but who doesn't? The orcs have to wear their differences openly, and essentially all nerds, all peoples wear their differences openly. You can't hide your differences. Skin in itself cannot be hidden. Um, we can't hide our differences. I mean, I'm saying, I'm just trying to see if there's anything else at that point. Um, I got notes. The orcs, they somewhat they have the expectation of brutishness. Like they would be crude people, gangs. They somewhat the orcs are somewhat like black people. Um, but the orcs are like black people, but they have they have characteristics of the white culture also to a certain extent. The orcs are expectedly brutish, like black people have been given that expectancy in the past, but they also are, which is the stereotype of blacks, but they also are apologetic of their racial history. Um, they're apologetic of their racial history, the war from 2,000 years ago and such. And whereas a lot of white people nowadays are apologetic for slavery, the modern times they are probably modern age people are millennials especially are white people are apologetic of the history of they feel that that wasn't supposed to happen, and that is the national consensus that wasn't supposed to happen. But the orcs are apologetic of their history, but they also have um, the idea, their cultural history, and the people who cling to their cultural history do have the idea of this dark lord that will come back. Um, all stories have this, especially cultural stories, but Christianity as well, primarily, have the idea of somebody going to come back from the darkness of from being away and save the people, rescue the people from whatever is. So to a certain, the Dark Lord, how alike is the Dark Lord to Jesus Christ? But I also feel that there are kind of their Dark Lord ideas also somewhat of not so much on the other side could be like a not necessarily the other side, but could be like a rebel leader. The Dark Lord is an archetype of a rebel, a leader of the rebel, these downcast, outcasted people. The Dark Leader, the rebel leader, Dark Lord, rebel leader will come back and lead them. I mean, the idea of a Messiah, similar like a rebel leader like Huey Newton. How people always look back to the past, the Dark Lord, the leader will come back. Um, but this becomes a very interesting thing. The Dark Lord idea will something that come back is meant to give hope. Um, it's the shield of light. Uh, the irony is that the Dark Lord and the shield. Well, the Dark Lord will be controlled by the people of the shield of light. The irony. Well, the Shield of Light were the people who would stop the Dark Lord, of course, though. No. But the entire story does involve the people of the Shield of Light. But the Shield of Light also, what is the Shield of Light exactly? The idea that people will come back, that the light is going to come back. This was told to us by the dirt bum guy who looked like a Jesus prophet. Honestly, he looked like a prophet. Um, the shield of light is somewhat of the rebellious group, but they have this idea of the thought of that something will rise again. The shield of light will rise again, and then the orcs will be able to take over. The Dark Lord will rise. The shield of light will cause the Dark Lord to rise again, and the orcs will take over. Um, I may have that part confused, I will say, but there's still the question of the lore that we do not see. But so it brings in the questions. It brings in ideas of uh, the idea of purity, not purity yet. The idea of what is just, is what it brings into ideas of what is pure, what is just. The idea of injustice, and within the idea of these policemen is a becomes a very problematic thing to pick out from. I mean, how am I organized? Outline right here. It becomes justice becomes a very problematic thing. Could be these are because the shield of light is who are they the good guys or are they the bad guys? Um, but the entire story has questions of who are the good guys and the bad guys because Tika herself was with the bad guys but chose to be with the good guys, which plays a part in the story and the meaning of the story as a whole later. Um, the ideas of justice and rebellion. Who are the the rebels? Who are the rebels really? Star Wars. Could you tell me? But the cops aren't the most just people. Even Ward says elf lives don't matter today, which connects back to Black lives don't matter today. But these cops they present some of the most callous ideas about race. I will say the quote where they were talking about why they use the orcs as football linemen. It's not racism, it's physics. Um, Somebody could say that again about regular football now. Uh, but uh, but they it's the cops also go as far as they are the ones who are plotting conspiracy. They plot conspiracy with Ward. They plot conspiracy with Ward and then plot conspiracy against Ward. Also, they are the dirtiest people in this story. But Ward eventually has to learn more important things of what's more important. Ward has to use skills to. Ward has to use because these people are unjust. Ward has to use his own conscience, his own understanding of right and wrong, to determine what is most important. Regardless of the cops and their racial hatred for Jacoby and their want to get rid of Jacoby to satisfy understandings of race that are already going on. If Ward would have found some reason to end up killing Jacoby, he would have essentially ensured and align himself more so with the ideals of the racist cops, the bad guys, the first bad guys we see are the cops, um, and the idea of moving forward. I believe one of the cops, the head magic cop, he said, "Act like my enemy, you become my enemy." So which is a very effective quote. It seems to suggest that in today's time, if we were to apply that quote to today's time, how true that quote is to today's time, um, act like my enemy and you become my enemy, it ignores the ideas of race. In the world of magic, you can't just judge people simply by race and the color of their skin. You have to judge people by how they behave towards you. If you act like my enemy, then you become my enemy. But on the inverse, if you act like my friend, you become my friend. Um, and is meant to say that people should look further than race for friendship, due to different circumstances. Um, but the goal of the key to survival in this world isn't just race, playing by racial uh, sureties, even, or nor by your own cultural, because all black people wouldn't be able to cling to just black people, but also even the orcs can't cling to themselves because they have some people who are blooded and not blooded. Ideas of authenticity within culture, how important authenticity is to culture. You got to be down. You got to be blooded. You got to have gone through struggle, some challenge of the and so people can see it. But some you have to pay. You have to pay dues to your culture and your society. It is necessary to be respected in the orc culture, which is somewhat reflective of Black people's culture, I will say, because within the hip hop culture is very heavily authenticity was always a thing, and hip hop was primarily a culture, a voice of the people. And everything that goes along with that. But a cultural and a social tool, cultural, a voice for social change. And the voice of social change said that you had to be committed to the community. You had to pay dues to the community. This is so very important that you pay dues to the community. The movie plays up the importance of it also from different angles. Whatever you do, you must um, you have to find some way to to prove yourself to your community, your culture. Um, the orcs have that so hard. I mean, the orcs have that. Uh, they're focused on authenticity, but it's his authenticity and your allegiance to the culture, the neighborhood. Even it's it's a big thing because later in the movie, the game, is it a game or a movie? I'm asking you. Is it a game or a movie? Uh, moving forward, but the allegiance to the neighborhood, your own culture is very the everyone deals with it. The elves deal with it. The Inferni elves, Tika and Layla, definitely deal with it, as we see in later parts in the movie when she feels that her sister is not aligned with her anymore. But so to be culturally connected is a good thing, is ideal, is the desired thing. But um, being bad is bad regardless. If you act like my enemy, you become my enemy. The police officers were the heroes, supposedly the heroes, but they were the first to commit badness in the story. They were the first to try to conspire and try to entice somebody else to conspire to do bad. Um, and then they get killed, and then the next bad person, people that we involve ourselves with, were the gangsters, run by Poison, which is very evil. Well, the question is, who's the most evil? I mean, Poison or the evil elves who are so vicious, killing children, but Poison is an interesting character because his name is Poison. He's a guy in a wheelchair with a colostomy bag, but he is most evil because he is culturally connected, but using his influence for bad, his influence over the people. His cultural connection is so important. It's desired to help the people in the neighborhoods because all of these people out here struggling. Even Ward is struggling, and the cops use his family and money issues to try to manipulate him into doing bad, which is so bad. But this has also been done by the government to destroy rebel groups like the Black Panthers and the like. Um, but here the cops was doing it to with their own to get rid of their own, which has also been done. People destroyed the governmental organizations and agencies, destroyed the Black Panthers, and even decades prior to what's his name? Oh my gosh, from Jamaica, the guy from Jamaica, I know his name, Marcus Garvey. Um, yeah, but cops have done things to foil uh rebel radical rebel movements, radical or not, because the Black Panthers were not as radical as the KKK, but they still exist. So, but the cops are bad. So the cops are bad, but even more so, who is bad is Poison. He has cultural influence and uses it for bad. Um, who's worse, Poison, the L's, or the cops? Uh, not sure. Well, we'll figure that out. I think Poison personally, because the elves are more cold hearted. They aren't thinking what they're doing. They're already more aligned. They're already more familiarly aligned. The uh, the The orcs aren't. The orcs have history, but them as a race aren't connected. They would be the next ones, the next villains that we face, that the enemies face. They go from the cops, fighting the cops, to fighting the gangsters, to fighting the orcs, and then to fighting the elves. Back and forth with the elves and the orcs, though. But the orcs aren't as culturally allegiant. So, well, to a certain extent, one would think that the elves, maybe their cultural and essentially spiritual allegiance, give them their strength to excel and fight as efficiently as they do. Um, but the elves are also meant to be the rich people, and with richness, we think of the idea of vanity, less spirituality, less connection to racial, to the culture. Um, but are they culturally rich or not? Um, are they culturally rich or not? I would say ideally they are. Um, the idea of brightness. When we think brightness, light, light always, not just light though. The name of the movie isn't light; it's bright. Brightness has to be sunshine. It has to be golden esque. It has to have luster. It has to have some shine on it. If it's bright, anything can be bright. But when you see bright, you see crest of light moving on against. To be bright, there has to be light somewhere, and even reflecting on something. Um, Brightness is, but okay, think about brightness and ideas, the idea of anointedness and spirituality. um but to lighten things, let's slow down. Facebook, not Facebook, nerd culture, the movie in itself is highly reflective of nerd culture. The story, the essential plot of the movie could be a video game. It could be a video game. It is a story of how is it very much different from Mario? Two guys brotherly saving a princess. She's essentially like a maiden, even somewhat like she's a maiden, somewhat like even what was I'm thinking? Final Fantasy, the iconic. Someone has to save her. Someone has to protect her, which lends itself to being prophetic, in that these guys, these soldiers, these cops, these heroes, these people, these Ward and Jacoby, who are trained at being heroes, stumble upon this princess. This entire event was prophesied prior to Jacoby by the bum guy who looks like bum Jesus. But Jacoby knew the whole time. He had the inkling of a prophecy in his mind from the beginning of the story, and then even more so than Ward. Um, um, even more so than Ward. So he was a bit more enlightened, I would say. You would think that uh, Jacoby is more enlightened, even more brighter if enlightenment is the key. Brighter, difference between brightness and light. Jacoby is more enlightened than Ward, definitely. But he's the orcish person, the most visibly ugly person, most unpleasant to look at. Um, so he knows, but and so he kind of guides Ward a little bit, but essentially they were both stuck with this a wand out of nowhere and a princess who can use it. Suppose they can't use it, they don't want to touch it. So what they have to do is protect the princess. She has a wand which have been so sought after for so long. She has to be of some kind of magical spirituality, magical connection, spiritual connection. She is a purity. She is. I mean, these are all the maiden princess archetype, and she's delicate. These men have to protect her. The heroes have to protect her, and they are all thrust into this. This is what is prophetic, is that they are all thrust into this and just have to. They have to use their best wits to navigate themselves through ideas of trust. They don't trust each other. They don't trust the cops. They don't trust the gangsters. They didn't trust the cops, and then they don't trust anyone else throughout the rest of it. The idea of trust could be played up more in the movie, but it's not. It is played up in the action and how they have to make decisions. But trust. Mm. The story in itself is meant to be prophetic. It's meant to be a spiritual story. Um, but I'm questioning what kind of spiritual story is it meant to be? Is it a cultural story? Um, I feel that the movie is meant to be as a conversational about the ideas of race, as Crash, the older movie Crash. Ludacris was in it, and everybody, Terrence Howard, everybody remembers Crash. It was great. It was a good movie. It was so dramatic, though. You had to be in a mood and ready and shit to watch Crash. It's going to have you in your feels, good and bad, and make you want to cry. This is meant to be talk. I feel like this movie is meant to talk just as effectively about race, but without the emotion. Um, how would you liken this story to a revolutionary story about a rebellious story, and along the lines of Malcolm X or Black Panthers, a rebel, the story of the rebels. But also, I do feel that with the ideas of spirituality and heroes, the prophet in the beginning of the movie, he looked like a Jesus. I think the story is meant to draw some connections to the Bible. It's all about a journey, people going through, but more so it's about struggle. Um, Historically, some philosophy believes that black people had to endure slavery because it was according to the Bible. We have to, Marley might say, we have to fulfill the book um, of everything that was supposed to happen, that is supposed to happen. But the orcs had to deal with the same kind of cultural disgust thrown at them as black people had to. Um, Black people were never as apologetic of their history as the white people are or whatnot, but still had to bear that cross. And well, to tie things up, it's about the movie as a whole is meant to suggest that people should be culturally connect in tune with the culture around them, their own history, but even more so outside of yourself. Because the best thing you can do is to be in tune with the culturally oppressed person. The orcs, they've had to deal. I mean, the orcs have had it better than the niggas did. Orcs have had it better than black people have. Us niggas did when they was calling us niggas, but The orcs had that on over and still live with it, is what it's meant to suggest. And Ward himself had to find himself connected with Jacoby. He could have been racist. He could have been speciesist. He wanted to. He tried to even, you know. But he had to learn to face his problems with Jacoby. He had so many problems. He got shot, and his problems, real problems, humane problems of trust. He had to see past his own humanity to forgive Jacoby for whatever. He had to see past his own race. He had to see past race. He had to see past humanity to see a larger connection of people to make the story happen, or else, like what the lesson that they had to learn to be successful at the story was being able to see above not only race but above humanity, and what is necessary for the larger story of life as a whole, the universe, and all of our differences that can make us uh, like elvish, make us elvish, orcish. All of these are issues that we find ourselves like. And the problem is that people, we sometimes come human beings, we live with assumptions. Racism was necessary because people were too stupid, because racism leans on generalizations. I have to expect that these people are going to be this way, and that's how we would make sense of understanding life for simplicity. We have to work from that angle, but we have to see past that completely. um Shit, we have to see past that to be successful. People, excuse me. um to be successful, and we have to be spiritually in tune. Just say, I lost my train of thought. I said something good and I lost my whole train of thought. The wand. The goal is to be in tune with culture, with the culturally oppressed. The black man had to learn even more. The black man already understands cultural oppression because black people had to live through cultural oppression. But to advance, black people even have to see higher, to what is necessary. See past. Black people too have to see past cultural and racial oppression to work towards the greater good of life. Um, these characters learned this, but even more so, it seemed that Tika taught this to them. Tika was the facilitator that made it so that they had to learn, that pushed them into, look, y'all got to get together because y'all got to save the princess. Even if you wanted to simplify it down into, if you were to flip and simplify it from orc and black man to, if orc is black man and black man is white man, black man and white man got to get it together if you're going to save the princess, the holiness, the spiritual purity, the maternal. She becomes maternal to them, but she makes them have to learn life, makes them have to learn without her ever saying it, because she's speaking a completely different language. Only person between the two that can understand the language is the orc, who is the culturally oppressed. The culturally oppressed person can speak the language of the elf, of the spiritual mother, the spiritual princess. So human beings are so far from spirituality. This is why all of life is meant to, you want to get closer to God and everything that comes with that. But the wand in itself, what is the wand? The wand isn't just magic, but it's also witchcraft. The idea of craft, magic craft, is something that you work at. I was thinking, yeah, art, spirituality, it's a magical stick, like a pen, but it's also a pen or pencil or quill, but there's craft to that. Magic has always had a craft to it, and one is spiritual artifact. It's of long of yore. It's been so old, and it's come to the future, and the magic is from the olden times. As if you can't find that magic nowadays. You can't find that magic here in the real world. Um, but this magic wand comes with this magical princess, and Ward and Jacoby are forced to protect her. And if that's all you got, you save the princess, or everybody else trying to kill you, you would have to find some God in there to push you through that. You have to find your own strength, your own will. You can't trust those people. Only people you can trust are Jacoby. Black man, only people you can trust is Jacoby and the girl and yourself. And the girl, she might walk around and get lost up in the tree somewhere. Who only thing you have to do is trust self and your own brightness, your own intellect, your own intelligence, your own enlightenment that's given from God, from life, from God, regardless of you asking, regardless of some people are just born with brightness. If they imagine the most apparent times of hearing the word bright would be when talking about a child. That child is bright. That child is just gifted at a young age, was just smart. They used to say that about me. But when you bright, you just gifted. You just enlightened. You're a smart child who can see above the races. The gold Will Smith's character learns to see above race, and we all want to engage with and be the most human character. The most human main character is Will Smith's character, who we want to be like. You want to learn and be in tune, but the ending, the man, he tells he told him what happened. And he said, "This is all of what happened with two street cops doing the hard day's work, whatnot, unequivocally." And then the orc said, "I'm with him unequivocally, unequally, equal. Well, univocally is what it means. Um, it means univocally, but univocally, I'm in vain. I'm in the same voice with him, with black man. Work says he's in the same voice with the black man. So black people have been the most culturally oppressed. The darkest person has been the most culturally oppressed. Uh, if we subscribe to that, then all people should reach out to the most culturally oppressed. But the more you look at reaching into out to the most culturally oppressed, you will learn that life is deeper than race. Uh, all these people, I'm not just trying to be black, I'm trying to be a elf warlock also. I mean, like all peoples that you meet, they aren't just trying to even be culturally aware and culturally align themselves with just this or that, just blackness, or just I like what elves do too. I like what orcs do too. I like what the fairies do too. But then what some of they do. Think about different cultures. Japanese anime culture, nerd culture in itself is anime, video games, comic books, all these different things that people try to find themselves attuned with, researching and finding and liking these things. Um, and if we minimize and simplify people down to just being racial ideas, we don't see how deep that person's true history goes. You would lump the orcs into the humans, lump the orcs and other races, all of these life forms on this planet in the movie, lump each other into generalizations, prejudices. The idea of what prejudice means is prejudging a person, basically just because of what you see on the outside, whether it be skin tone, shade, or a curve of ears, or at all, or nothing at all, or I mean, something completely different. Judging another person based on an idea of history that may or may not have ever influenced them themselves. It's still history. 2,000 years. If you go all the way back to 2,000, what happened 2,000 years ago, and then judging a person off something. It's like, do you really think that my culture is so bad that I couldn't have evolved in 2,000 years? If I was an orc, do you think that I'm me, culture, everything that has happened, like, you really think you that smart? That nobody is on the same 2,000, no, that we haven't changed and learned, evolved as a species, natural selection. But you think mentally these people haven't evolved enough to understand the error of their ways? But you're going to judge me based off history, whether it be 2,000 years ago or 200 years ago. Regardless, you don't know me. You do not know what these people do go through, and you don't know these people. We always go about we always judge each other uh, based on incorrect information. It's completely incorrect. It's completely invalid information, and the movie shows the problems of that. If Ward would have ever sided with anyone outside of Jacoby and the girl, but Jacoby more so, if he would have ever sided with anyone outside of Jacoby, he would have failed. Mission over. Game over. It would have been over. But he sticks to his guns. He has to judge. The funny thing about Ward, he's such an outspoken character. He gets special treatment as if he's bright. He gets special treatment. He's loudmouthy. He's over the top. You know how he still talks to the cop. Give me the phone. Give me the phone. He talking. He all in the scene, like all in the moment, like controlling, trying to control it. Like, I mean, loudmouth about like Chris Tucker in Friday. I mean, Will Smith as loudmouth as Chris Tucker, but that was Will Smith doing Will Smith. He set the tone for that. But that's what it was, though. But he took so much liberties. Will Smith himself pushed boundaries in everything. I mean, his character Ward, as a character, would push boundaries. He didn't just accept the status quo. He could tell that he's coming at me, and I still gotta. He still had to be offensive. He still had to be offensive, even though playing for stealth, playing behind stealth. The movie in itself is a great movie. As I said, I feel like it speaks to the necessity for cultural awareness, cultural and neighborhood attunedness, being close to the vibe of the streets and your own culture, your own heritage, but also have your own values of heritage and such like that. But even more so, don't let your own heritage and history stop you from connecting to a person outside of yourself, and be conscious of how you and we human beings do this. Use generalizations, and how detrimental generalizations, assumptions, prejudice is to our understanding, to how dangerous it is to our connections with other human beings. Um, yeah, so I was trying to do. I was going for an hour. I guess this is good. Wanted to stop, and yeah, I'm gonna keep on doing some more of these. Talking about different movies, albums, and things like that. And I hope y'all enjoyed this. If you just listen, follow it. We can have a conversation over drink sometime or something. Um, but yeah, it's all good information, and peace y'all. Y'all have a great night, and take it easy.